That's definitely one for the books, Bruce. I don't think I've seen offside, medium, slow, fast pace bowling to match it since Baden Powell took Rangajangabanga for a maiden ovary at Bangalore in 1948. I had stumbled into the surreal and rewarding world of cricket on the radio. After years of patient study, and with cricket there can be no other kind, I have decided that there is nothing wrong with the game that the introduction of golf carts wouldn't fix in a hurry. It is not true that the English invented cricket as a way of making all other human endeavors look interesting and lively. That was merely an unintended side effect. I don't wish to denigrate a sport that is enjoyed by millions, some of them awake and facing the right way, but it is an odd game. It is the only sport that incorporates meal breaks. It is the only sport that shares its name with an insect. It is the only sport in which spectators burn as many calories as players, more if they are moderately restless. It is the only competitive activity of any type other than perhaps baking, in which you can dress in white from head to toe and be as clean at the end of the day as you are at the beginning. Imagine a form of baseball in which the pitcher, after each delivery, collects the ball from the catcher and walks slowly with it out to the center field, and that there, after a minute's pause to collect himself, he turns and runs full tilt towards the pitcher's mound before hurling the ball at the ankles of a man who stands before him wearing a riding hat, heavy gloves of the sort used to handle radioactive isotopes, and a mattress strapped to each leg. Imagine moreover that if this batsman fails to hit the ball in a way that heartens him sufficiently to try to waddle 40 feet with mattresses strapped to his legs, he is under no formal compunction to run. He may stand there all day, and that as a rule does. If by some miracle he is coaxed into making a misstroke that leads to his being put out, all the fielders throw up their arms in triumph and have a hug. Then tea is called and everyone retires happily to a distant pavilion to fortify for the next siege. Now imagine all this going on for so long that by the time the match concludes, autumn has crept in and all your library books are overdue. There you have cricket. But it must be said, there is something incomparably soothing about cricket on the radio. It has much the same virtues as baseball on the radio. An unhurried pace, a comforting devotion to abstruse statistics and thoughtful historical rumination, exhilarating micro moments of real action, but stretched across many more hours and with a lushness of terminology and restful elegance of expression that even baseball cannot match. Listening to cricket on radio is like listening to two men sitting in a rowboat on a large, placid lake on a day when fish aren't biting. It's like having a nap without losing consciousness. It actually helps not to know quite what's going on in such a rarefied world of contentment and inactivity, comprehension would become a distraction. So here comes Stovepipe to bowl on this glorious summer's afternoon at Melbourne Cricket Ground. One of the commentators was saying now, I wonder if he'll chance an offside drop, scone here or go for a quick leg over. Stovepipe has an unusual delivery in that he actually leaves the grounds and starts his run just outside the Carlton and United Brewery at Kooyong. That's right, Clive. I haven't known anyone start his delivery that far back since Stopcock caught his sleeve on the reversing mirror of a number 11 bus drive during the third test at Brisbane in 1957 and ended up at Goondiwindi 4 days later, owing to some frightful confusion over a changed timetable at Toowoomba Junction. After a very long silence, while they absorbed this thought and possibly stepped out to transact some small errands, they resumed with a leisurely discussion of the England fielding. Neasden, it appeared, was turning in a solid performance at square Bowell, while Packet had been a stalwart in the dribbles, though even these exemplary performances paled when set aside the outstanding play of young Hugo Twain buttocks at Middle Nippo. The commentators were in calm agreement that they had not seen anyone caught behind with such panache since Tandoori took Rogan Josh for a stiffy at Vindaloo in '61. At last, Stovepipe, having found his way over the railway line at Flinders Street, the footbridge was evidently closed for painting, returned to the stadium and bowled to Hastie, who deftly turned the ball away for a corner. This was repeated 4 times more over the next 2 hours, and then one of the commentators pronounced, so as we break for second luncheon and with 11,200 balls remaining, Australia are 962 for 2, not half, and England are 4, but the duck and hoping for rain. I may not have all the terminology exactly right, but I believe I have caught the flavor of it. The upshot was that Australia was giving England a good thumping, but then Australia pretty generally does. In fact, Australia pretty generally beats most people at most things. Truly, never has there been a more sporting nation. At the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, to take just one random but illustrative example, Australia, the 52nd largest nation in the world, brought home more medals than all but 4 other countries, all of them much larger, the countries, not the medals. Measured by population, its performance was streaks ahead of anyone else. Australians won 3.78 medals per million of population, a rate more than 2.5 times better than the next best performer, Germany, and almost 5 times the rate of the United States. Moreover, Australia's medal-winning tally was distributed across a range of sports, 14, matched by only one other nation, the United States. Hardly a sport exists at which the Australians do not excel. Do you know there are even 40 Australians playing baseball at the professional level in the United States, including 5 in the major leagues? And Australians don't even play baseball, at least not in any particularly devoted manner. They do all this on the world stage and play their own games as well, notably a very popular form of loosely contained mayhem called Australian rules football. It is a wonder in such a vigorous and active society that there is anyone left to form an audience. No, the mystery of cricket is not that not that Australians play it well, but they play it at all. It has always seemed to me a game much too restrained for the rough and tumble Australian temperament. Australians much prefer games in which brawny men in scanty clothing bloody each other's noses. I am quite certain that if the rest of the world vanished overnight and the development of cricket was left in Australian hands, within a generation the players would be wearing shorts and using the bats to hit each other. And the thing is, it would be a much better game for it. In the late afternoon, while the players broke for high tea or fifth snack or something, in any case, when the activity on the field went from very slight to non-existent, I stopped at a roadhouse for gas and coffee. I studied my book of maps and determined that I would stop for the night in Hay, a modest spot in the desert, a little off the highway, a couple of hours down the road. As it was the only community in a space of 200 miles, this was not a particularly taxing decision. Then, having nothing better to do, I leafed through the index and amused myself in a very low-key way by looking for ridiculous names of which Australia has a respectable plenitude. I am thus able to report that the following are all real places: Weewar, Poowon, Barambatok, Sugambugan, Boomanumona, Waia, Mulumbimbi, Ulimatop, Jigalong, and the supremely satisfying Titibong. As I paid, the man asked me where I was headed. Hey, I replied, and was struck by a sudden droll thought, and I'd better hurry. Do you know why? He gave me a blank look. Because I want to make hay while the sun shines. The man's expression did not change. I want to make hay while the sun shines. I repeated with a slight alteration of emphasis and a more encouraging expression. The blank look, I realized after a moment, was probably permanent. Ah, you won't have any trouble with that, the man said after a minute's considered thought. It will be late 4 hours yet. Hay was a hot and dusty but surprisingly likable little town off the Sturt Highway across an old bridge over the muddy Murrumbidgee. In the motel, I dumped my bag and reflexively switched on the TV. It came up on the cricket, and I sat on the foot of the bed and watched it with unwanted absorption for some minutes. Needless to say, very little was happening on the field. An official in a white coat was chasing after a blown piece of paper, and several of the players were examining the ground by the stumps, evidently looking for something. I couldn't think what, but then one of the commentators noted that England had just lost a wicket, so I supposed it was that. After a time, lanky young man in the outfield, who had been polishing a ball on his pant leg as if about to take a bite from it, broke into a loping run. At length he hurled the ball at the distant batter, who insouciantly lifted his bat an inch from the ground and patted it back to him. These motions were scrupulously replicated 3 times more. Then the commentator said, and so at the end of the 452nd over, as we break for afternoon nap, England have increased their total to 17. So still quite a lot of work for them to do if they're going to catch Australia before 4th snack. I went out for a stroll over the terrestrial hot plate that is inland New South Wales in summer. The day was extravagantly warm. Every leaf on the curbside trees was limp, like a tongue hanging out. I wandered up and down both sides of Lachlan Street, the main drag, and then some way out into the country to enjoy the sunset, an event always of calm and golden glory in the bush, and in the hope ever unfulfilled of seeing some kangaroos hopping picturesquely into frame. Kangaroos are commoner in Australia now than they were before Europeans came, because all the rural improvements, the encouragement of grassland, the creating of ponds and so on, has benefited them in the same way it has sheep and cattle. Nobody knows how many kangaroos the country holds, but the number is generally assumed to be over 100 million, making them not much less numerous than sheep. But could I find even one out here? I could not. So I strolled back into town and passed the evening in my usual gracious style. Lager cocktail in a forlorn and nearly empty pub. Dinner of steak and salad in a restaurant next door. Another stroll to the edge of town to look in vain for kangaroos by moonlight. I was back in my room by about 9:30. I switched on the TV and was impressed to see that play was still going on in the cricket match. Give the men their due. It may be light work, but they put in the hours. The man in the white coat was still chasing paper, though it wasn't possible to tell if it was the same piece. England, according to the commentator, had lost another 3 wickets, which seemed rather absent-minded of them. At this rate, they would soon run out of equipment altogether and have to call it a day. Perhaps, I decided as I switched the TV off, that was what they were hoping for.